Thank you for listening to Etlan Community Church. Our mission is to proclaim God's greatness throughout the mountains through biblical teaching and a worshipful lifestyle. If you would like more information about our church, please check out our website at etlanchurch.com or visit us on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. We hope you enjoy.
But how are y'all doing this morning? Good to see you. It is good to be with you. I want you to look at your neighbor right now and tell them, maybe give them a fist bump, a high five, and say, I am glad to see you this morning. Say, it is good to see you. It is a good morning. But my name is Matt Schwenk. Like I said, I'm the lead pastor here at Etlan Community Church. And we are family here at Etlan Community Church. And sometimes we don't say it enough, we don't point to it enough, but you are a part of that family, and we are glad that you are here, even if it's your first time visiting, or if you've come before, or maybe it's been a little bit. We have missed you, and we're excited to see you. So it is good to have you, to be here. And I'm excited to be sitting with my family, looking forward to what God is going to be teaching us, and what He's showing us in His Word, that we can joyfully go after Him and expect Him to move, because that's what He does when His people gather together. And it's good for us to gather around God's Word, grow in our walks together with Christ. So it is a good morning. And this morning, we're wrapping up our series partially on Ruth. So it is the greatest love stories that we've been in. And Ruth, we had to take a few extra weeks to really dig into because there's so much good content in her story. And let me make sure my mic's on. Yes. There's so much good content with her. And specifically, we've seen throughout all of this how God's love relates to us through Boaz and also through Ruth. We've seen some of these great moments where God has used some of these broken human vessels and displayed His unfathomable love. Because what better love is there than the love of Christ? Than the love that we feel and that fellowship that we feel when we gather together as connected parts of His body. He is the source of all the love that we could ever give or receive. So every ounce, every fragment of love that you have ever felt or given out, that is just an echo or a glimpse of the just original, unshakable love that He gives to us. In fact, that doesn't even do it justice. You need to recognize that that greatest moment of love that you could probably pinpoint in your mind, maybe it's your wedding or anything like that, that moment is just an incomplete reflection of God's love. It is like looking into a broken mirror, and you just get just a glimpse of the ocean of love that we get to experience. Psalm 118:1, it says over 26 times, "Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His love endures forever." It is never ending. It is unchanging, despite the fact that we could never add value to Him, that we could mess up time after time after time. His love endures all of that. And this morning, we have the privilege to attempt to wrap our mind around that great love, and it's displayed through two widows and a worthy, honorable man. So we're going to wrap up our time looking at Naomi and Ruth's story and how this man Boaz, he was used by God to redeem a situation that many of us would consider unredeemable. And the past few weeks, we've seen how Ruth displayed this idea of love by clinging to Naomi. When she could have gone home, she could have moved on, and she said, peace. But nope, she stayed there, and she clung. And instead, sacrificed her potential for someone else's pain. Then last week, we saw how both Ruth and Boaz displayed this idea of hesed love, H-E-S-E-D. Boaz invested in Ruth by providing and protecting for her. He invited her to be a part of his household. That's incredible. And furthermore, he embodied this picture of God as our refuge and strength. Ruth was able to feel that. And then she continued to display that deep type of godly love to Naomi. She gathered food all day long just to scrape together a little bit of a meal for her mother-in-law. But now we come to the final two chapters, and this is the moment where all you Hallmark addicts, you've been looking forward to this. This is good. This is a great romance. But it is not between some big city girl and some small town Christmas tree salesman. No. This is between a foreign, poor, lowly widow and a prominent, faithful Jewish man. Two people that, if you were to read this story not knowing any context, it does not make sense. This should not have happened. These two should have never had anything to do with one another. But God, in his inexplicable sovereignty, he guides them together. And so if you have your Bible, I want you to grab it and open up to Ruth 3 with me. You can even grab one in front of you. If you've never done that, it's okay. Those Bibles are for you to use, and you can even write in them. They're just to work through and help you learn. So grab a Bible, and we're going to be reading some of these different portions of these two chapters and work our way through the story. But as you turn there, I want you to keep this in mind throughout our time together, that if you leave here with just this, you are going to be all right. That is good. God redeems those who seek him. God redeems those who seek him. So let's look at our passage this morning, Ruth 3. When you get there, say, got it. Okay. If you don't have it, if you're not there, say, hold up. Okay, good. That's good. All right, Ruth 3, starting verses 1 through 11. This is what it says. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to Ruth, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor, and do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, and then go and uncover his feet and lie down. And he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of his heap of grain. And then she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid down. And at midnight the man was startled and turned over, and a woman lay at his feet. He said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. He said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. That's where we're going to pause. We're going to pray and go before the Lord. Dear God, we just thank you so much for this time together. Thank you for your Spirit, that it is living and active, that you are here working in our hearts right now, and I pray that you show us something new. Help our hearts latch on to your truth. God, you redeem even the most broken situations, and we believe and put our trust in that because we've seen it. Our lives display that. So help all of us here, especially the ones who are far from you, to get a better grasp of that idea. So we give this time to you, God. It's in your name I pray, Jesus. Amen. Now I want you to imagine it's your birthday. For some of you, it's not too hard. I'm looking at you, I know. Others, it might be your birthday, but I'm keeping my eye out. But everyone's sitting around the table there at your birthday party, and then you've got this big present placed in front of you. You tear through the paper, you see the big box, you open it up, and you're excited only to find a dinky little plastic piece of card right there. It is the simple gift card, the classic, I had no idea what to get you, but this is good enough gift. And I don't know about you, but I actually really like gift cards. You can ask Lauren, and she'll tell you I'm a little bit of a penny pincher, and so when it comes to money, I tend to save rather than spend it, and that goes to a fault that I will not let anyone do that in our family. And these gift cards, they actually give me an excuse to be able to spend some money on myself. I get excited, I enjoy it, it's guilt-free, and I'm able to get what I want. But is there anyone else like me that you just love getting a gift card? Okay, look around, spouses. You need to recognize this. This is important for you. Other ones, most people did not raise their hands, so recognize that. Remember that. Right. Gift cards are pretty cool. You get an allotted amount of money, and you can trade in this simple piece of plastic for something of value. You can redeem it for something that you want. And most of us like that idea of a free gift when we understand it. You understand that little card has value, and so we get excited when we open up that gift. But I want you to think back to that party, and now imagine that it was a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old open up that gift. They rip off the paper, they open a big box, they see a dinky little card, all sad and lonely in there. And what do you think their reaction would be in that moment? You might see some tears, you might see some looks of disappointment. If you're lucky, you might see some kicking and screaming, and it will be a show. But that card, it doesn't mean anything to them. that doesn't have any value. They don't understand the value. And honestly, they probably would rather have the box just to play in that. Even if the card was $1,000, it's not the big present that they expected. It's no different than trash to them. And even though they could have gone down to the store, they could redeem that for something of value. It could have been the best gift that they received, but they miss out on it entirely because they don't understand the gift. And that, my friends, is the picture of God's redemption. Only you and I are that crummy little piece of plastic. You and I can only be redeemed if we go to the right place. And there is value placed on us only when we seek the right one. Honestly, there's not even value that you place on yourself. It's solely given by the one who made you, the one who sacrificed himself for you. But the trouble that we often run into is that so many people are like that disappointed 2-year-old. They open the gift and they don't understand it. Either we look to give ourselves or redeem ourselves to all these different places. Maybe we dedicate our time to inappropriate things or look to get inappropriate possessions and do activities, or we try to add value to ourselves. We try to make ourselves acceptable or good enough. If we have a good enough life, have a good enough background, a good enough family, good enough everything, then maybe I'll be something of worth. But that is one of the greatest lies from Satan. You could never add value to yourself. I know that's a hard statement, but it's a true statement. You are not redeemable by anything you could do or anything that you bring to the table. If you go to the wrong places or look to the wrong gods, dedicate yourself to inappropriate things, you will too be unredeemable. You will be in a broken, disappointed situation. Your life and your potential as a gift would have been wasted, because I promise you, if you take a gift card to Walmart and go to Yoder's, they're just going to throw that away. It doesn't mean anything to them. We have to recognize that our lives are a gift from God, and our lives are only redeemable through Him who we seek out, and through the sacrifice that Jesus made. It's only by God's grace and mercy that we have any value at all, but because of His great mercy and grace, we see that He redeems those who seek Him. And that's our story this morning that revolves around this idea of God's redemption. The main vessel that we see display this idea of redemption is Boaz. It all points back to Christ. So I want us to go through these last 2 chapters of Ruth this morning, and there's going to be 4 sections that you can fill in, and I gave you kind of open time to fill in notes as you want to, but those 4 sections that will guide us are first revived, then request, redemption, and lastly restored. Revived, request, redemption, restored. And like branches that come off of a tree, this is kind of going to come off our main idea and lead to what it is of God redeems those who seek Him. So let's work through our passage together. We're going to start in the first 5 verses of chapter 3. And so you'll see this idea of revived here. Starting in 3:1. It says, "Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to Ruth, 'My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is now winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies down and go and uncover his feet and lie down, and then he will tell you what to do.' And she replied, 'All you say I will do.'" So we'll pause there, because something is now different in the story. And if you haven't been here the past few weeks, you probably wouldn't have noticed it. But something has changed. It starts with Naomi. Up to this point, we've only seen despair and grief from her. She has been rightly caught up in mourning and pain and thinking of the loss of her husband and sons, because originally she left Bethlehem. She was excited to leave. She left the place God was at to go to Moab, the place God was not at. And then she came back after losing everything with her sons and her husband, and she changed her name to Bitter. That's what she wanted to be known as. She came with this pain that she felt. And then after days of not even eating, Naomi even sends out Ruth to get some food in a place that she's never been. She's got to go out and gather something and bring it back home. And even after bringing loads of food home, she didn't even thank Ruth. She focused on Boaz, the man who allowed her to gather it. Honestly, Naomi, she has not really shown any motherly interest in Ruth up to this point. She didn't provide any comfort after Ruth's husband died. All she did was give her this option to leave. But in this moment, we see something different about her. She isn't just sitting in her own grief, focused on herself and her situation. No, instead she's looking out for Ruth's intentions and needs. Despite the pain and grief of the past, she has revived hope. Revived hope, and a purpose in her life has now been sparked. So she's finally looking out for Ruth. It says, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" In other words, Ruth, isn't it time that I help you in your need? Isn't it time that we found you a home? It isn't focused on me. No, it's focused on you, helping your needs. She has flipped this selfless mentality. She has revived, refreshed, renewed all of this hope through an idea of a redeemer. And she's looking to pour into Ruth and to find her some more secure provision and protection. And like a mother, she tends to step in a little too much. She wants to play matchmaker. But this makes us ask a hard question for ourselves. What would it take for you to get your eyes off yourself and your situation and to look to serve someone else? What would it take for you to get your eyes off yourself and your situation and look to serve someone else? What would it take for you to take your eyes off your needs, your grief, your brokenness, your pains of the past, and see the needs of those around you? Because that's a hard question to answer, all of us. It can be good for us to grieve things for a season. That is said in Scripture. There's time to mourn and weep. But the issue is when we get stuck in that grief for months, years, and decades. And if you aren't careful, that grief will incapacitate you. You will be so focused on your situation and who you are, your own bubble, that you become ineffective for the work that God has for you. And this world is in need of godly men and women to step up. But whether it's out of fear of getting hurt again, or out of past pains that we're processing through, if we aren't careful, we are not available to be used by God. In Ecclesiastes 3, it speaks of seasons, and I just want you to think and listen to these because there's so many good ones that you might think, what one am I in right now? And so hear these and maybe think of which one you're living in right now and maybe which one God is nudging you to. So this is Ecclesiastes 3. For everything there is a season, a time for every matter under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and then a time to speak, a time of love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. For your life, which season are you in of those? Which speaks to you and does your heart just latch onto that you're like, I've been living in this season? And maybe which one is God saying, hey, I need you to be in this season right now? It is good to recognize the season we're in, but the problem happens when we're living in a season of weeping, when God has easily placed us in a place of dancing and celebration of laughter. And so for Naomi, God has placed her in the season of revival and renewal. Something is new and it's about to take place, and she sees the potential of what God's doing for Ruth through Boaz. And so God's about to redeem them. And it starts with Naomi seeking the having this love for Ruth like God, selflessly putting Ruth's needs above her own. But that leads us to the next section in verse 6. So I want you to look at that. This is where we see request. Look at Ruth 3:6 with me. It says, so when she went down to the threshing floor and did as her mother-in-law had commanded her, and when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and then she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, the woman lay at his feet. He said, who are you? And then she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. So pause right there. Ruth is just following her mother-in-law's instructions in this moment. She gets cleaned up and takes a bath, which I want to say, because this is important, I worked with middle schoolers. This advice is probably the most important advice you could get. You need to take a bath. Like, clean yourself up. If your mom tells you you need to be cleaned up, you need to listen. Please do not go a week without bathing. I've seen that at camp with middle schoolers. It is not a fun time. It's disgusting. So, rightly, if you want to date someone well, you should take a bath. But Ruth, she makes her way down to the threshing floor. She follows the customs of this time, and it sounds a little strange to us because it's just not what we're used to, but it wasn't an inappropriate thing that was going on. We know it wasn't inappropriate because it describes them as men and women of honor. So we know that they are doing the right thing in this moment. But just a pause right here. This isn't even in my notes. Even if it wasn't, say they did do something bad. That shows that God can work even in our brokenness. So recognize that. Even if there are some that would say that, oh, this is something sexual going on here, not good. But it's like, you know what? Even if there was, God is using their brokenness to bring his restoration. But more than likely, they are women and men and women of high character. Nothing's going on. And Boaz, he's just guarding his wheat from thieves. You got to remember from the beginning of the story, there was a famine going on. So people are going to want to steal this food. So to keep people from stealing his food, he's going to lay there all night and guard it. And there's no night lights back then. So he's going to be in the pure dark. When he feels someone touching his feet, he's probably going to get ready to throw hands. And I mean, that's what I would do. I'm like, who's touching my feet right now? No one's supposed to be in here. Who's there? And Ruth replies by submitting herself to him. She calls it out. She says, hey, I am your servant. And she refers back to a moment that they had earlier, if you remember. So if you read Ruth 2:12, Boaz blesses her, and he says, God will cover you with his wings. And so she's referencing this idea in this lovely moment that she had with him earlier. God would be her refuge. Because of all that she was sacrificing to Naomi, all that she gave up for her, he would guard her and protect her. And now she sees how Boaz will be a literal fulfillment of that blessing. And so her request translates to asking, hey, will you take the corner, and this is literally what it means, take the corner of your coat and cover me. And so it's this idea of coming under his wing, coming under his protection. And she wants him to be be her refuge. And so really this is just a marriage proposal for the time. She is bold enough to come to him. She requests his help and submits herself to him. And you may not be familiar with it, but she's referencing this idea of a kinsman redeemer. Who's heard of the idea of kinsman redeemer before? Yeah, okay, so a few people. Kinsman redeemer. This is essentially where the head of the household, they die, and so someone in the family line, usually a brother or the next closest kin, a cousin of some sort, they would be obligated to protect the persons, the property, and the future of that family. They would be the family's redeemer. They would marry the brother or the brother's wife or the cousin's wife, not their sister. It would be like the sister-in-law. And the firstborn son of that new couple would carry on the family name. That's the idea of going on here. And that son would then receive the land that the Redeemer bought earlier. They would represent the part of the family line. And it might sound a little weird to us because we're like, that's marrying my cousin. Like, oh, that's not a good thing in our culture. But for them, this is normal. This is a part of it, and it's a way to make sure that people are protected. So they didn't want these families to then go on and not have some sort of provision in their life. And this is a way to provide. So there's purpose behind it. And Ruth, she is asking Boaz to be her husband, to be her father-in-law and her husband's redeemer. And remember, Naomi had no future as well at this moment. Her husband and kids, they were gone. They're out of the picture. So this was a way for their family to be redeemed, to be restored. And Ruth makes this bold request to Boaz to fulfill the law and make her his wife. Carry on someone else's family name. And so look at his reply in verse 10. This is what he says. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do all that you ask. For all my fellow townspeople know that you are a worthy woman. Again, speaking to her character. So Boaz, he's ecstatically agreeing. He's kind of excited about this. You can hear it in his voice. Where he's like, yeah, of course I'll marry you. You chose me? I'm kind of ugly, but you chose me? Great. This is awesome. So he's excited that she chose him. And then she didn't have to. This law of the kinsman redeemer, it wasn't her problem. She is not originally Jewish, so she could have gone on living the life that she wanted to. But as you see in the next verses, Boaz, he didn't have to go on to redeem her either. It was in this moment where we see that Ruth makes a request and Boaz goes on to fulfill it. All that she has to do was ask and to seek him out. All that we have to do in our relationship with Christ, it parallels that. All we got to do is ask. Jesus, he chooses to redeem us, and we must seek to surrender to him. Salvation is as simple as asking for it. Just listen to this. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Romans 10:13. Jesus did everything that was necessary to save a sinner's soul. And so all we have to do is humble ourselves before him and ask, crying out to him to come in our desperate need and ask for that redemption. It is as simple as it sounds. God redeems those who seek him. Now, if you read the next verses, you know that there's a problem that comes up in the story. Boaz, unfortunately, isn't the redeemer first in line. And there's someone who has first dibs on this land and on Ruth. And so he goes on to talk to this fellow redeemer. So turn to chapter 4 and look at verses 3 through 6 with me. This continues on with the story. This is Boaz talking to the redeemer. And he says, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. And then Boaz, he's making sure to present this in a favorable way for himself. So you can kind of see that in how he presents it. But Boaz then says, then the day you buy it, I forgot to tell you that the hand of Naomi, you also require Ruth, the Moabite, the woman of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. In verse 6, the Redeemer said, I can't redeem it then for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. And so this is the moment, obviously, of redemption, the third in our notes. Neither this man nor Boaz were forced to redeem Ruth in this moment. They could let her go and fend for herself. But Boaz, being the honorable man that he is, in this loving, gracious act, he chooses Ruth too. He takes on the burden to provide for him, the obligation to give this land back one day. And he helps carry on the name of Elimelech. And there's 3 requirements that every kinsman redeemer must do. And if they don't, they're not able to redeem someone. So these are important 3 moments. 1, every redeemer must first be a relative. So they had to be family in some way. Number 2, every redeemer had to be willing to redeem. If they didn't want to, they weren't forced to. Like this other man, he didn't want to, so Boaz went on wanting to. Number 3, every redeemer had the ability to pay, must have the ability to pay the cost. So they have to have a means to provide for the family in some way. If they don't have a means, how could they take care of someone else if they can't take care of themselves? So, of course, Boaz, he meets each of these. He was a relative of Ruth, and he loved her, so he was willing to marry her. He had the ability to pay for it because he was wealthy. We see that, a means to provide. But we would be remiss if we don't see how this represents our great Redeemer. First, Jesus was our kin too. The Bible says that he became flesh, so he humbled himself to be born in the likeness of man in Philippians 2. And he became like us, becoming our kin in order that we could be redeemed. Not only that, but second, he was willing to redeem us. Listen to this out of Matthew 20:28. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So he came to pay that price for us. He wanted to pay our debts, taking on our punishment in order that we could be found in right standing with God. But also, lastly, he had the ability to pay for this. He had the ability to pay our cost of redemption, and so he paid for us with his life. It was by his blood. It was by his suffering that we are made clean. This is what 1 Peter 1:18-19 says. Know that you were ransomed from the feudal ways that were inherited from your forefathers. You were ransomed not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. Boaz was Ruth's redeemer, and Jesus is ours. You can't help but see that moment in that time aligned. He redeems those who seek him in request of it. But that's not all we get from the story, because look at Ruth 4:14 through 17 with me. And here's our final moment. It's called restored. Restored. Let me read that for you. Ruth 4:14 through 17. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer. May his name," this is the son's name, "be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So right there we see that Naomi's bitterness, that moment where she was upset and broken, this has now been turned into blessing. That hope that was taken from her at the very beginning of the story, when she left everything and lost everything, now that hope has been restored. Not only that, her family line, it was once in shambles. It was broken. That has now been restored. Ruth's lost future would now be restored. And guess what? Our story, it opened up. If you remember, chapter 1, it talks about, it's in the time of Judges. The time of Judges was known that because there was no king, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Now in this moment, through Ruth and Boaz's relationship, their children, that would lead to King David, through whom you would see this Israel's relationship with God, that would now be restored. So that opening up with hopelessness is now having restoration. And more than that, through the Son of David, Jesus Christ. You could almost hear, I want to reread that a little bit. Just listen to all these declarations of what Obed meant to Naomi, and how does this not talk about Jesus? He has not left you without a redeemer. May his name be renowned in all of Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life, a nourisher in your old age. And he loved it. There's so much just pointing to him. But we see that Jesus Christ, he came into the world, and all of humanity can now be restored. The passage is filled with this idea of restoration, and it all is because of this redemption that was unlikely, but it took place. God redeems those who seek him. And through that redemption, we are restored to him. We are made again how we were once intended to be. So throughout Ruth's entire story, you can't help but see parallels to God's love for us, how his great and mighty love that we talked about at the beginning, that led to our redemption. Now I'm going to invite the band up so you guys can come on up, bring your little communion cups. And as we wrap up this section, I want to do 2 things real quick, if you give me the time. First, I want us to ask some really hard questions of our own life. And if you need room, write it on the back of your page, because these are important to write down and wrestle through. And the second, after we ask those questions, is we're going to take communion together. Because there's no better time to partake in the Lord's Supper in dwelling on that great redemption and that love and sacrifice than this time of communion. So does anyone else need a communion cup? It's okay if you do. Okay, cool. If you need one, they're over here and Justin will get it to you. So let me ask these questions, and we're going to have them on the screen, but I want you to write them down, journal them, sit, pray through them, and then afterward we'll take communion together. But the first is this. What does redemption in your life look like? What relationships in your life need to be redeemed? Is that your marriage, your friendships, or your family members? And then next, is there someone you know in a difficult situation that needs this kind of redemptive love right now? Think of how Ruth clung to Naomi. Can you do that in someone else's life? How could you be that vessel for God to spark that redemption with that person? Is there something keeping you from that redemption to take place? And lastly, in regards to Jesus, Do you really believe in this redemptive love? Are you acting like it? Do you treat others with that kind of love? Or do you even treat yourself with that kind of love? More importantly than that, dwelling on this great love how great this love is, are you worshiping him appropriately? Are you recognizing where you would be without this great redemptive love? Crying out and recognizing your depravity apart from him, thanking him for coming into your brokenness and your instability, that he did not leave or forsake you despite that. So I know it's a lot, and I know that's a lot of questions in mind. But with those to think about, let's go into a time of communion. And I want you to dwell on who Jesus is, what he has done, how we can respond, and then we'll go into some worship. So grab your communion cups, and grab one. I'm going to read a passage for you out of 1 Corinthians 11:23. And I know you've heard it before, but I want you to kind of listen with some new ears at this moment. It's oftentimes that we'll hear these passages that we hear over and over and over, and we just kind of tune it out. Don't tune this out. This is important. This is the sacred fellowship with God. This is a sacred, beautiful moment that you could miss out on. It's not just a simple snack. It's not a tradition. This is a command, straight from Jesus. So hear this. This is 1 Corinthians 11. For I received from the Lord what I have also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, so right after he knew that his suffering in this moment would come, that he would die for you, on that scandalous but marvelous night, he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, and he said, "This is my body, which is for you. Take this in remembrance of me." So recognize what this symbolizes. I want you to take that now with you. And in the same way, he also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood." This is the thing that gives us hope. Without this, we would still be lost in our sorrow and shame. But this is his redeeming blood. Take this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. So let's take that now. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim, you point to, you recognize the importance of the Lord's death until he comes again. Until you see him and meet him face to face, this is what we get to dwell on with communion. There's power in his blood. There is power in this time, so do not forget that. And we're going to close with some worship for Jesus and for that great love. So let me pray, and we can do that. Dear Lord, thank you so much again for this time. Thank you so much for this incredible, redeeming love, that without you, we would be lost to sorrow and shame. We'd be caught up in the tragedy of our own stories and in this broken world. But Lord, you did not abandon us in that brokenness. But despite us abandoning you time after time, you still seek us out. So we come to you now, seeking you. Be with us in this time of worship. Help us to recognize the truth of this love. We ask that you're here, Lord. It's in your name I pray, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you this coming Sunday at 10 a.m. at 217 Church Hill Road in Etlan, Virginia. Have a great day.